Hello again. I took a short break. Chessbase made me change clothes. They do that so it doesn't look like they make you work non-stop on these duties, but actually they do. So this chapter is gonna be very complicated because we're dealing with what in my view is nowadays the main line of the Marshall. And it's also the only chapter where I'm not 100% sure which line to recommend. And the others I'm reasonably sure my recommendations are good. But here Black has very many options. And all of them are sort of playable, but there is no clear-cut solution I'd be really happy with. Anyway, let's get started to see what we're talking about. It's the position after 15 Queen E2. This move was more or less unknown and nobody took it seriously for a long time. But it sort of hit the mainstream after Svidler, I think, played it first against Leko in the World Championship in Mexico in 2007. And okay, it doesn't look very scary at first sight. White just wants to go Queen F1 as quickly as possible to harass the Queen on H3 and then decide how to develop his pieces. Start with Knight D2, Bishop E3, basically depending on Black's reaction. And Black has two main moves, which we both gonna look at. Gonna look at both, excuse my English. And the most obvious one is Bishop G4, and I think it's not the most popular one at the moment, but I think objectively it might actually be the best and simplest solution. White goes Queen F1, Black goes Rook AE8. Oh no, hang on. Black could go Rook AE8, but that leads to an ending, and in general we don't want endings in the Marshall, I don't want them, as I've said many times. This kind of position, White keeps his extra pawn, and it's not so easy to prove full compensation, especially because the bishop is sort of misplaced on G4. Would rather be on D7. We're gonna get to that later. So, my recommendation is to go Queen to H5, which is also the main move. Planning the usual Rook AE8 and then Bishop H3. Take it from there, depending on what White does. Jesus, I really can't speak today. Knight to D2. Now Rook AE8. And here comes the big point of White's play. I think somebody tried Knight E4, but it's really not very frightening. Black just goes Bishop C7, and then he's ready to start his attack with F5, F4, Bishop H3, whatever. It's a nice Marshall position. But the point and what brought this line into limelight, I think this is also what Svidler played, is to go F3 here. We're familiar with the idea already. White gives back his F-pawn, but he wants to simplify a little bit and take control over the center. So after the most natural moves, which would be taking on E1, Queen takes back and take the pawn, White claims that he is a little bit better because he got rid of a lot of Black's attacking potential and has the two bishops. And while that might be true, I actually think this position is quite reasonable for Black, and I also think that objectively this might be the way to go. It's definitely the way to go for people who don't want to spend a lot of time on this Queen E2 and just want an easy and reliable solution. For those, I definitely recommend going this, just playing the most natural moves. So here after Bishop D2, Black shouldn't play too aggressively. People have tried playing H5 and stuff like that, but in general here Black should just try to keep his position solid. The bishop is well placed, as with the pawn structure the knight is well placed, so we just want to go Queen G4, let's say Queen D1. We're gonna want to go back to D7, and now we're planning to go Rook E8, Bishop F8, maybe G6, Bishop G7, then H5 or maybe F5, depending on the circumstances. And overall Black is reasonably solid, and I think this position is very close to equal. And I'm frankly not sure why nobody goes for this anymore with Black, because I think it's pretty reasonable. So let's say Queen F3, for example. Rook to E8 works anyway, because if White takes this pawn, Black has enough counterplay with Rook E2. So you shouldn't do that, but play something. Rook E1 or Rook F1 instead. Rook E1 we'll probably take, and then go Bishop F8. And Black is always in time to get this kind of setup to go G6, maybe Bishop to G7. And I think the position is very playable, even though I'll admit it's not the most sexy line.